Dr. Elizabeth Hoefer is on a mission. She wants to know, is your head on straight? In a world gone sideways, Dr. Hoefer provides clarity with balance and structure.
Hey everybody, this is Your Head on Straight with Dr. Elizabeth Hoefer, and today I'm going to be sharing an important story that's really near and dear to my heart because it's my story. The reason that I became a Blair Upper Cervical Chiropractor, the reason that I feel like I have a purpose and a calling for my life on this planet, and I thought it would be really important to have you guys finally hear the passion behind why I do what I do from my perspective. I've been interviewed by a couple of other people in the past, and I've shared my story through an interview format, but I think it's important for my listeners to hear my story so that you guys can really understand what makes me tick. So without further ado, I'm going to tell you what's been going on the last decade. October 27th, 2017 came and went, and that was a pretty monumentous day for me because that marked a 10-year anniversary for my first Blair Upper Cervical Correction. And the reason that is a monumental day is because a decade is a very long time. And in my life, before I had been introduced to the Blair Upper Cervical work, I don't think I finished much of anything. So for the fact that I've been doing what I do for the last decade with more passion every day than I have the day before, it's a pretty incredible thing. So if you go back 10 years, you're going to find me, Liz Molina, just about a year away from graduating from chiropractic college and really suffering from depression and suicidal ideology. I was a single mother. I worked a couple of jobs during college, but I was about a year away from graduating from chiropractic college, and I wasn't that excited about what I was looking at for my future prospects. I had gotten into chiropractic college, and I lived vicariously through the things that I saw as far as people getting better through traditional chiropractic and rehab and things like that. And I thought, well, there's something to this. I want to be a bigger part, which led me to becoming a student in the doctorate program. But when I got to the point where I was getting ready to have to start making decisions about my future, I was still suffering tremendously. And I was at a loss to how I was going to be able to convince people that chiropractic was the answer because I wasn't well. I wasn't mentally better. I had been diagnosed with bipolar when I was 20 years old, and leading up to that was an incredible story of, I guess, tenacity and perseverance getting through my childhood years and my teenage years under some pretty interesting circumstances. So let me take you back to the beginning, if you will. When I was 2 years, 9 months old, this was 1982, folks. My mother left me and my brother and my father on Christmas Eve and didn't come back. So that's the earliest trauma that I can remember. And even though it wasn't a physical trauma, that psychological abandonment has affected me and still does affect me to this day. So my dad was left with two toddlers to figure out how he was going to raise us. And needless to say, he was a little bit under-equipped and overwhelmed. So we ended up living with his parents for most of my life on and off. Before I turned 11, I called 6 different women mom. And that's pretty traumatic because having to maybe call one other person mom is hard when you really have a mother that you want to be in your life. But my dad was desperate and wanted to have a woman to help him raise his kids. And I don't blame him because now that I'm a mom and I have 3 daughters, I undoubtedly couldn't do it without the help of my amazing husband. But bad choices leads to bad circumstances, and one lady after another, after another, after another. And like I said, by the time I was 11, the 6th woman was introduced. So it was not a fun time. And my dad struggled. He struggled, I think, emotionally. He struggled, I think, chemically, and it was awful. So that was an inconsistent time during my life with not a lot of stability and always moving back and forth to my grandparents' house whenever something didn't work out. And then in my teenage years, I think it just got a lot worse because all of us that have grown up have gone through adolescence and puberty, and you just really are unsure of yourself and you're trying to figure out who you are. And the last thing that I needed was more upset and more irritation from a psychological standpoint. I played softball. I was in the musicals at school and high school. I was into music and singing and theater. I had physical trauma from car accidents and different things. And sadly, there was some physical abuse as well. So by the time that I was 14, the state of Iowa recommended that I didn't live with my father and his third wife anymore. So I ended up right back at my grandma's house, grandma and grandpa's house. And I lived there from the end of 8th grade through the beginning of my senior year. And I think that when you look at how people make choices in their life, I didn't have a lot of confidence with who I was. I didn't have a lot of confidence in my situation. And even though my grandparents provided like material structure, there wasn't a lot of emotional and mental support. So when I started dating, I of course started dating a guy that probably wasn't the best for me in an emotional situation. So at 17, I thought that I knew everything, just like every 17 in the world thinks, right? So I moved out with my then boyfriend, and I ended up actually transferring high school as my senior year and basically kind of doing it on my own at the end of my high school career. So by the time I graduated high school, I had made enough money that I could move out on my own and get an apartment. And immediately, Robert, my boyfriend in high school, moved in with me. We left his mom's house, and we moved into our own apartment. And I think we graduated in May, and by September, I was pregnant with my first daughter. So I was 18 years old in a pretty tumultuous relationship with a not so supportive and mature person. And then I was pregnant. So from a physiological standpoint, our frontal lobes aren't even developed until we're 25. So I have a lot of opinions about when marriage should happen and when people should procreate, but that's because my broken circumstances. Now, there are some people that are very mature and some people that could probably handle all that kind of stuff when they're a little younger. But for me, it just wasn't a good thing. The good thing that came from it was my amazing daughter, Lauren, who is now 18 herself. And I look at her and I think, goodness gracious, I was younger than her doing more adult things because of the choices that I had made. And all those choices were made out of this brokenness and this longing to having this desire to be included and be loved and being supported. And while I was in junior high and high school, I developed a really horrible, I guess, diagnosable condition known as depression. And then truly it started with suicidal ideology. Unfortunately, the first time I tried to kill myself, I was 13 years old. And that was when I was living with my father and his wife in a little town on the river in Iowa. And I tried to hang myself. And obviously it wasn't successful. I'm here talking to you today, but that was a wake-up call for me, knowing that I was so desperate I was willing to end my life at 13. And unfortunately, we see more and more on these social media sites, all these kids that are suffering from being bullied, and they choose to take their own life. And we just feel so regretful for how come nobody knew, or wasn't there something we could have done and could have said? Well, I was that kid too. And thankfully, my plans were foiled and it didn't work out because I wouldn't be here, but I was desperate and I was sad. And obviously, I didn't know anything about upper cervical chiropractic or what could help me from that perspective at that time. I just knew that I wasn't well. And I started seeing psychiatrists, psychologists. They put me on medication when I was in high school and it didn't help. It actually made me worse. And if you look at the statistics and the studies with these different psychotropic medications that they do prescribe to teenagers, I think that they're starting to realize things like Prozac and Zoloft are actually creating more problems than they're helping. And I think that that was the category that I landed myself in back in the time. So by the time I was 20, I had attempted 3 or 4 more times and I got diagnosed with bipolar 2, rapid cycling, and I was put on lithium and Effexor and Risperdal. Risperdal is an antipsychotic because basically what happened was I had a nervous breakdown, otherwise known as a psychotic break. And it was really scary. And I had some really good friends that helped me and they saw that I was crumbling and they intervened and I got some help, or the help that they knew how to give me, which was help me get checked into a mental hospital. And I was there for about 2 weeks. And in that time, they took care of my daughter and I just spiraled out of control. And so long story short, I ended up moving back in with my grandparents for a short period of time to kind of get stable. And I wanted to figure out what I needed to do with my life. So I was working full-time jobs along with part-time jobs, and it wasn't enough to pay the bills. So I thought, you know what, the only way out of this situation is an education. And mind you, I was always a very bright student. I always did well in high school with my grades. Studying wasn't hard for me. It was just that I was so preoccupied with feeling overwhelmed and literally feeling like I wanted to die every single day from age 13. It was hard for me to motivate myself to get up and actually get to school. Once I got there, I was good. I could learn well and I did well on tests and I was actually put on a pretty good show as far as having a social life and things like that. But literally getting out of bed every day was a nightmare. And I struggled really, really, really bad. So my friend's mom gave me a part-time job working at Palmer College of Chiropractic at night, basically checking in patients and helping the student doctors that were in college learning how to be a chiropractor and the staff doctors that were treating these patients. So I got involved and I thought, wow, there's something to this. I really enjoy seeing people come in here not feeling well and leaving with a smile on their face. I want to be a bigger part of that story. And I started working there when I was 21 years old. And it started off, like I said, as a part-time job in the evening. But it quickly became something that I was interested in as a career because I was always had this compassion for people who were suffering and who were hurting. And even though I didn't have a lot of physical complaints, I had ridiculous mental anguish. And so I got into regular, straight, full spine chiropractic care, and I got well enough to get off my medication. And that was a huge thing for me because the medication is toxic and it just didn't go well with me. I just gained a lot of weight and I felt like a zombie and I really couldn't concentrate. So getting off the medication helped, but I still had this overwhelming sense of not wanting to get up and live every day. And mind you, this entire time, I have a daughter who's depending on me for support and for comfort and for nurturing. And even though I was there physically for her, which is something that actually kept me from wanting to kill myself, ultimately was the fact that I did have this little girl that I knew if she grew up without me, it would just be another vicious cycle, another generation of suffering. So after I had her face is what came into my mind each and every time I had an attempt. And obviously the attempts weren't really designed to actually do anything because I wouldn't have survived if they were. They were a cry for help. And I was seeking help in the wrong places. So thank God I was able to eventually get led in the right direction. And I'm going to get to that in a minute, which is incredibly powerful. But when I started working at Palmer, I was getting regular chiropractic care and my nervous system was getting healthier. So I was able to get off the medication, and then I started looking to the education opportunities that arose from Palmer. So they had this associate program called the Chiropractic Technology Program. And that program is basically a 2-year degree that allows you to become an assistant to a chiropractor. It's kind of similar to what like a nurse is to a medical doctor. And I would assist the doctor with doing exams. I could take x-rays. I could do insurance billing and basically run their office. And I thought, wow, that would be incredible. I could have somewhat of back office skill set where I could assist the doctor, and then I could help run the front desk, which I'd already been doing for a year. So on my 22nd birthday in 2002, I enrolled in the CT program and I was excited. And about 2 tries in, which is 2 terms into my program, I spiraled out of control with depression and I had another psychotic break and I actually had to take a mental health leave of absence for a semester, or I guess a trimester. So it put me back a little bit, but getting the help I needed, or what I thought I needed at that time, gave me some perspective and helped me realize that I can't just play anymore. I have a little girl that I have to figure out what I'm doing. I have a life that I have to continue to live, and taking my life wasn't going to be the correct answer on any level. So I started taking some more classes in the evening and I switched my days where I would work in the day, I would go to school at night, and I would do my prereqs for my bachelor's of science. And that was because when I was working at Palmer, I would sit in the back and pull files and talk with the doctors of chiropractic students. And they would say, Liz, you have what it takes. You have everything that it takes to become a great doctor of chiropractic. And I was terrified. I said, there's no way that I could ever do that. I was scared of the school, the level of intelligence that was needed. I was scared of all the tests they had to take. I was scared of the boards that they had to pass in order to get licensed. I was scared of the debt that they had to take out because going to chiropractic school is very expensive. It's worth it, but it's expensive. And I just had a lot of fear in my life because, again, I had never really completed anything. And at the time they were talking to me, I was still in my associate's program. And one of the things that I recognized during that associate's program is that I wanted to know more. I wanted to know why. I wanted to know how. And you aren't privy to that information when you're an assistant. You just help the doctor assist them and you fill in the blanks, but you don't get to understand the whole concept. And that bugged me. So I was already getting my interest piqued because of the things I was learning. I just didn't know that I had what it took, right? And it was these students that would just say, Liz, you can do it. You have the gift of gab. You're easily connected to people. You have a lot of compassion. You'd be a perfect chiropractor. And I thought, wow, well, if these people are seeing something in me I don't see, they're healthy, and maybe they know something I don't know. And one day at a time, I got everything out of the way and I ended up enrolling in chiropractic college for the doctorate program. That was actually in November of 2004. So it's been a couple of years at this point. I've been under regular chiropractic care. I'm off all the psychotropic medication. I'm no longer having horrible bouts of depression, but I still have this overwhelming sense of death every day. And even though I fought it, it was really difficult. And some days it would creep up on me more than others. And basically what happened was I made a really good friend in college. Her name is Jackie Newhouse. She was Jackie Dukes back then. And we became study partners and we helped each other get through all of our classes by studying and cheering each other on. And that was all fantastic. And then, like I said, in 8th trimester, the end of 7th trimester, I really was struggling again with severe depression. and suicidal ideology that was overwhelming to the point where I was starting to talk about it with my friends and just begging them for some kind of help. And I was also to the point where I thought maybe getting back on medication was the answer. Maybe quitting school and going back into some sort of day treatment was the answer. And Jackie listened to everything that I had to say for a long time. And then one day she basically gave me an ultimatum and said, I've heard about this Blair Upper Cervical Chiropractic treatment. We've been exposed to it in 4th trimester at school. You haven't tried that, and I think there's something to it. If you don't go get this done, I'm not going to be your friend anymore. And that was like a huge potential loss. I really couldn't fathom getting through chiropractic school without her, and we still had an entire year to go. And I didn't want to lose her as a friend because she was my best friend. So I reluctantly submitted myself to the student doctor and the staff doctor at Palmer College, and I told them my whole health history. I gave them all of the examples of physical abuse. I gave them all the examples of chemical abuse. I gave them all of the examples of the psychological trauma that I suffered from. Because if you know anything about chiropractic, you understand that there's 3 things that cause your body to be out of alignment. And out of alignment equates to your nervous system not functioning like it should. And that's thoughts, traumas, and toxins. And I had a litany of all 3 of those things in my life. And because I was so well educated, I knew that I had to take this serious, and I wanted to give the doctor and the student doctor the best possible scenario to do what they could do. And I had to tell them everything. So I laid it all out there. And it was a very vulnerable situation to be in because everybody wants to look good. Everybody wants to have their act together. And especially a year away from graduating, you're supposed to know where you want to go, what you want to do, or at least you should have an inkling to know where you want to go or what you want to do. And at that point, I was losing faith in myself. I was losing faith in the profession. And I just didn't even know if the hundreds of thousands of dollars in student loans that I had just borrowed to get to the point where I was at was even going to pay off. So again, I submitted myself to the student doctor and I submitted myself to the staff doctor. And I got my first correction, October 27th, 2007. And what's so remarkable about that is that if Dr. Hubbard hadn't read my x-rays, I don't think I would have gotten an adjustment. An untrained doc would have said, your alignment doesn't even look real. But Dr. Hubbard saw something and knew something wasn't right, and he pushed and he tested and he found exactly what was wrong. And it wasn't that I had bipolar disorder, it wasn't that I had depression, and it wasn't that I was on a detox from lithium. It was the fact that I had a very, very deadly upper cervical misalignment at the top of my spine, a subluxation at my atlas. And he actually let Kevin Leach, who is now a doctor in Seattle, do the adjustment on me. And on that day, my life changed instantaneously. I laid down on the table, I got my upper cervical correction with the Blair Chiropractic technique, and in an instant, I felt hope. In an instant, the heaviness and the cloud of suicide and the cloud of depression and the cloud of anger lifted off of me. And I literally heard sounds clearer for the first time. I saw colors more brightly for the first time. I felt like I had such an awareness in my body for the first time in my life. And I got up off the table and I said, what did you do? And I must have said it in a kind of scary tone because they were really big-eyed and they stared at me a little bit. And I just told them what happened, what I experienced, how I felt. And all they could do was smile. And I just was in tears because I felt hope for the first time in my life. And I can't even begin to describe to you the weight that was lifted. There aren't really words. And the only way that you could ever even understand is if it happened to you. And thankfully, now for this last decade, I've been able to give the exact same hope to people when they come in to see me at my office. When I talk to them about my story and I share my testimony and I tell them, my daughter has a mom because of the correction that I got 10 years ago. My husband has a wife and I now have 2 other daughters. I wouldn't have had any of that stuff if I hadn't got that correction. I know that I wouldn't be here. My life would have been taken. Whether it was me taking my own life or me making choices that became so reckless that my life ended in some capacity, I wouldn't be here. So I'm here to tell you that chiropractic does save lives, and my life is the example. And that is why I am so passionate about what I do. When I meet people, when I interview them and take their health history, I go deep because I understand the power behind an emotional trauma, a physical trauma, a chemical trauma, and people that have lived lives where nobody has ever listened to them or where they felt abandoned, where they haven't felt heard. I get it. I lived it. And this isn't a diss on my family. And I realize, looking back, my dad was doing the best he could do. I feel like he has grown and there's hope for the future. And I have siblings that I know are having a significantly different experience because when you know better, you do better. So I just know that everything that happened to me had to happen for me to meet that doctor and that student doctor on that day, have that specific adjustment at the top of my neck, and it healed me. So 10 years later, I am still telling my story as passionately as I felt it the very first day. And I have helped thousands of people, thankfully, and been able to share my story with even more than that over the years and inspire inspired people to go seek out Blair Upper Cervical all over the country because people hear about my story and then they know somebody who's had problems with depression, or they know somebody who has anxiety issues, and they know somebody that has suffered in the way that I suffered, and then they refer them to a good doctor wherever they may be. And so this is why I keep talking about it. This is why I share my story. This is why I'm not ashamed and I'm not embarrassed. And yes, it's vulnerable. Of course it is. It's an intimate, really precarious subject. People get really funny about mental health issues, but I can tell you and I can assure you today, I don't suffer from bipolar disorder. I am healed because of upper cervical. And so I'm never not going to talk about it. As long as I have breath in my lungs, I'm going to shout about the healing power and the miraculous power of the Blair Upper Cervical Correction because it literally saved my life. So as soon as I got the adjustment, I immediately enrolled in the elective that thankfully was offered on my campus, and I learned the work, and it's a difficult technique to master, and that's why there aren't very many of us. But now that I am a doctor and I've been in practice for almost a decade, I am giving back. I teach students, I hold seminars, I travel all over the country. Anytime I have an opportunity to speak to, whether it's a doctor or a student or a lay group, I go because I want people to understand there is something to this. And BJ Palmer said that chiropractic is specific or it is nothing, and I am living proof of that. I'd been under chiropractic care my entire life and it never helped me. It wasn't until I got that specific correction done by trained eyes who knew what to look for. I'm so thankful that happened. And I know the people that I've been able to be a doctor to are thankful. And it's incredible. We're hitting a record almost this month with the amount of new people that are coming into the office because one way or another, they've heard about the power behind the Blair Upper Cervical Correction. I take care of people that have neck fusions. I take care of people who are post-surgery. I take care of people who really don't think like they have anything going on, but their aunt or their brother or their sister had an issue and they want to see if they can be benefited from it. And literally from all walks of life, from a baby, literally 2 hours old, all the way 2 days ago, my oldest patient turned 102 years old. I take care of the gamut, and it's incredible, and it's a remarkable life that I get to lead, and it's a remarkable career that I get to have. So I just wanted to share with you guys my story. And I know when I did my introduction, I talked about the fact that this show is more than just chiropractic. I mean, it's what I do. It's what I spend my day doing, but there's so many more implications in that. So I hope that you guys are fascinated by the fact that mental illness was healed through Blair Upper Cervical Chiropractic. And I am a living, breathing testimony that chiropractic does save lives. And I'm really thankful that you guys have tuned in, and I'm excited to share with you future things that are coming up. I have exciting testimonies from different patients that I'm setting up, and we're getting all those interviews done, and you name the condition and I've probably had a crack at it. So not literally, but figuratively speaking, I've been able to analyze, detect, and remove their subluxation, and they've gotten better. So I hope you guys keep listening, and I hope you guys are excited and are starting to feel a little bit more passionate about the work that I do, because I think that that's what I do, is I breed hope and I breed passion in people, and it's a cool thing to do. So thanks so much for listening, and I can't wait to hear from you guys. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns on anything Blair Chiropractic or otherwise, please email me and let me know what you want to hear about. I'd love to reach out and get a topic going that you guys are interested in hearing from, and I look forward to having you tune in on my next episode. Thanks so much for listening, and until next time, you guys be blessed.
Thank you for listening to Is Your Head On Straight with your host, Dr. Elizabeth Hoefer. Visit drhoefer.com for more details in the show blog post and to learn what Blair Upper Cervical Chiropractic Care can do for you. That's drhoefer.com, drhoefer.com.